At 75, Erin Hernandez stood barefoot on the cold pavement, clutching a single worn bag, while the door behind her clicked shut for the last time. Inside, Michael avoided her eyes. Samantha folded the paperwork with quiet satisfaction. "It's already signed," Michael had said. "There's nothing more to discuss. No goodbye, no hesitation, just silence, and the echo of a life erased in a single moment." Neighbors watched, but no one moved. Erin didn't beg. She didn't cry. Instead, she turned and walked away from everything she had built toward a place she had spent years trying to forget. Because buried in that forgotten land was something her husband had never fully explained. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, stay with this story. Sometimes what's taken from you is only the beginning. The road to Oregon felt longer than Erin Hernandez remembered, not because of the miles, but because of what waited at the end of it. She hadn't been back in over 20 years. Back then, it had been a choice. Now, it was her only option. The bus dropped her off just before dusk at a small, forgotten stop where the asphalt cracked into gravel and silence swallowed everything else. No one greeted her. No taxis waited. Just wind, low and steady, moving through the distant trees like a whisper that never quite formed into words. Erin stood there for a long moment, gripping the strap of her bag, her fingers stiff from more than just age. She could still hear Michael's voice in her mind. Calm, detached, final. It's already signed. She swallowed hard. For years she had told herself she understood him, that life was hard, that people made choices under pressure, that maybe, just maybe, he didn't realize what he was doing. But standing there now, with nowhere else to go, Erin knew the truth was far simpler. He had known, and he had chosen anyway. The gravel crunched under her shoes as she started walking down the narrow path that led away from the road and into the trees. The air smelled different here, damp, earthy, untouched. It was the kind of scent that carried memories whether you wanted them or not. With every step, pieces of the past rose up around her. Laughter echoing across a wide stretch of land. The low hum of a man working in the distance. The feeling of safety she hadn't realized she'd once had. By the time the old property came into view, the sun had nearly disappeared behind the horizon. And there it was, the house, or what remained of it. Erin stopped walking. The structure leaned slightly to one side, its wooden frame weathered and gray, as though time had slowly drained the life from it. The porch sagged. The windows were clouded with and neglect. One shutter hung loose, tapping softly against the siding whenever the wind picked up. It looked smaller than she remembered, or maybe she had just grown used to forgetting it. Her chest tightened, not from shock, but from something deeper, something heavier. This place hadn't always been like this. Once it had been full, not grand, not luxurious, but alive. And standing there now, Erin felt the weight of every year she had spent pretending it didn't exist. She walked slowly up the path, each step hesitant, as if the ground itself might reject her for staying away so long. The front door resisted when she pushed it open, the wood swollen from years of rain and cold. It creaked loudly, the sound cutting through the silence like a protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust. The furniture remained where it had been left, covered in faded sheets that had long since lost their purpose. A chair near the fireplace, a small table by the window. The outlines of a life paused and never resumed. Erin stepped inside. The floor groaned beneath her weight, but it held. She set her bag down near the doorway and looked around, her eyes adjusting slowly to the dim light filtering in through the dirty glass. This had been his place, Luis's place. Even after all these years, just thinking his name stirred something quiet and complicated within her. Luis Hernandez had never been a man of many words. He didn't explain things. He didn't argue. He simply did what he believed needed to be done. And sometimes that had been the hardest thing about loving him. Erin moved toward the window and pulled back the curtain, letting in a faint wash of fading light. Outside, the garden stretched out behind the house, or rather, what used to be a garden. Now, it was a tangled expanse of overgrown weeds, broken fencing, and patches of wild growth that had long since claimed the land as their own. She stared at it for a long moment. That garden had once been his pride. Every morning, Luis would step outside before the sun fully rose, his boots already dusted with soil, his hands moving with quiet purpose as he worked the earth. Erin used to watch him from the window, a cup of coffee in her hands, wondering what he saw in it all. Back then she hadn't understood. It had just been dirt. Work, something that kept him busy. But now she remembered something else. A voice, low, steady, certain. The garden will take care of you one day. Erin closed her eyes. She hadn't thought about those words in years. At the time, she had laughed them off. What does that even mean? She had asked, half amused, half confused. Luis hadn't answered right away. He had just looked at her, really looked at her in that quiet way of his. And then he said simply, "You'll understand when you need to." She hadn't pressed him. That had been their way. Some questions didn't get answers. Some things were just left alone. But standing here now, with nothing left but this broken house and a garden swallowed by time, Erin felt something shift deep inside her. Because for the first time, those words didn't feel like a mystery. They felt like a warning, or maybe a promise she had never taken seriously. A cold breeze slipped through a crack in the window, brushing against her skin and pulling her back to the present. She opened her eyes again and looked out at the land, the garden, the place she had ignored for decades, the place he had never tried to explain. A flicker of something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but something close to it. Something quieter, something cautious. Curiosity. Erin stepped back from the window and moved slowly toward the back door. It took more effort to open than the front, but eventually it gave way with a sharp crack, as if breaking a long silence. The air outside was colder, darker, the last traces of daylight fading quickly into shadow. She stepped onto the uneven ground, her shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. The garden stretched out before her, wild, unkempt, almost unrecognizable. But as she stood there, looking at it, Erin realized something she hadn't expected. It didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. She couldn't explain it. There were no sounds beyond the wind and the distant rustle of leaves. No movement. No sign of life beyond what nature had reclaimed. And yet there was a presence here. Not something she could see, not something she could prove, but something she could feel. As if the land itself held on to something that had never been uncovered, something buried, something forgotten, something hers. Erin took a slow breath, the cool air filling her lungs. For the first time since she had been forced out of her home, the weight pressing down on her chest shifted just slightly. Not gone, but different. Because standing there, in the middle of that overgrown, forgotten garden, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to believe. Maybe she hadn't lost everything. Maybe she had just been sent back to where it all began. And somewhere beneath her feet, the truth her husband had kept for a lifetime was still waiting to be found. The first morning in the old house did not feel like a beginning. It felt like punishment. Erin Hernandez woke before sunrise on a narrow couch covered with an old quilt that smelled of dust, wood smoke, and years of neglect. Her back ached, her knees throbbed. Cold air had crept through the walls all night, slipping beneath the door frames and through cracks in the window panes like it had been waiting for her. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the ceiling came into focus. The water stain above her, the peeling paint, the silence. And memory returned all at once. Michael, Samantha, the papers, the locked door, her home gone. Erin closed her eyes again, but there was no sleep left in her. Only the dull, heavy knowledge that no one was coming to fix this. No one was going to knock on the door and say it had all been a mistake. She sat up slowly, pressing one hand against the couch arm to steady herself. The house answered with a groan. In the kitchen, she found 2 cans of soup left in her bag, a half-empty bottle of water, and an old kettle with rust around the rim. The electricity had been disconnected long ago. The sink coughed twice when she turned the faucet, then released a thin stream of brownish water before going dry. Erin stared at it. Then she laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because if she didn't laugh, she might break. At 75, she had imagined her days would be quiet. Maybe lonely, yes, but familiar. A cup of tea, a warm room, a photograph album, a phone call from her son, even if brief. Instead, she was standing in a dead kitchen, counting cans of soup like a woman half her age and twice as desperate. Outside, the garden waited. By mid-morning, Erin had wrapped herself in Luis's old work jacket, found hanging in the entry closet beneath a layer of dust. It was too large for her, the sleeves swallowing her wrists, but the weight of it gave her a strange comfort. She stepped into the backyard with a dull kitchen knife, a bent rake, and a pair of gloves so stiff they barely moved. The garden looked even worse in daylight. Weeds towered in tangled clumps. Blackberry vines twisted through the broken fence, their thorns catching at anything that came too close. Dead branches lay across the soil like old bones. The raised beds Luis had once built by hand were nearly hidden beneath moss and rot. Erin stood at the edge of it, suddenly overwhelmed. "This is impossible," she whispered. And for a moment, she believed it. Her body was tired before she even began. Her hands were weak. Her heart was bruised. Every part of her life had been reduced to survival, and the land before her seemed to ask for strength she no longer had. But then she remembered Luis. Not as an old memory, as a presence. His patient hands in the soil, his quiet voice. "The garden will take care of you one day." Erin tightened her grip on the rake. "Then you'd better start helping," she murmured. And she began. The first hour nearly defeated her. She pulled weeds until her fingers cramped. She dragged dead branches into a pile near the fence. She cut through vines with the dull knife, one stubborn piece at a time. Twice, she had to sit on the back steps, breathing hard, sweat cooling beneath the old jacket. No one saw her struggle. No one praised her for trying. But slowly, almost invisibly, the garden began to change. Not much, just enough. A patch of soil appeared beneath the weeds. A corner of one raised bed emerged. A narrow path, almost hidden, revealed itself beneath leaves and mud. Erin stared at that path. She didn't remember it being there. It ran from the back porch toward the far end of the garden, curving between two overgrown beds, before disappearing near a cluster of old cedar trees. She frowned. Luis had loved order. Every row, every stone, every tool had once had its place. But this path felt different, too deliberate to be accidental, too narrow to be useful for ordinary gardening. Still, exhaustion pushed curiosity aside. By noon, she had cleared enough space to plant the few seeds she had brought from the city lettuce, beans, carrots, and tomatoes. Nothing impressive, nothing miraculous. But when she pressed them into the soil, her hands trembled with something almost like prayer. "Please," she whispered. It was not clear who she was speaking to. God. The earth. Luis. Maybe all three. That afternoon hunger made her dizzy. She heated soup over a small camp stove she found in the storage room, using the last safe water from her bottle. As she ate, she thought of Michael sitting at her old dining table, perhaps already deciding what furniture to sell. Samantha might be walking through Erin's bedroom, opening drawers, touching things she had no right to touch. The thought made Erin's stomach turn. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. Anger. Not loud, not wild, a quiet anger. The kind that does not burn fast but stays hot for a long time. "They took the house," she said softly to the empty room. "But they didn't take me." The words surprised her. So did the truth inside them. The next several days became a rhythm of hardship. Wake cold, eat little, work until her body refused. Rest. Begin again. Rain came on the third day, steady and gray, soaking the garden and leaking through the roof above the hallway. Erin placed pots under the drips and used the rainwater for washing. She learned which floorboards were safe, which windows could open, which corner of the kitchen stayed warmest when she lit a small fire in the old stove. She was not comfortable, but she was adapting. And with adaptation came a small stubborn dignity. On the fifth morning, while clearing weeds near the strange narrow path, Erin found the stones. At first, she thought they were just part of the old border Louise had built around the beds. But when she brushed away the dirt, she saw they had been arranged in a pattern. Not a straight line, not a simple circle, a spiral. Small flat stones carefully placed beneath years of mud and roots curling inward toward a patch of earth near the cedar trees. Erin crouched slowly, her knees protesting. Her gloved fingers moved over the stones. They were too even, too intentional. She cleared more leaves, revealing another curve of the spiral. Her breath caught. Louise had never mentioned this. Not once. She looked back toward the house, almost expecting to see him standing at the window, quiet and unreadable, waiting for her to understand. But the window was empty. Only her own reflection looked back, old, tired, but no longer helpless. Erin returned to the spiral with the bent rake and began clearing the center. The soil there was darker than the rest, packed harder, as if it had not been disturbed in a very long time. After several minutes, the rake struck something. A dull, metallic sound rang out beneath the earth. Erin froze. For a second, she thought she imagined it. Then she tapped the rake again. There it was, metal, buried beneath the soil. Her heart began to beat faster. She dropped the rake and used her hands, scraping away dirt with slow, careful movements. The ground was cold and damp beneath her gloves. Mud gathered beneath her nails. A thorn had cut through one finger, but she barely noticed. Bit by bit, something surfaced. Not a treasure chest, not a box, just a curved strip of old metal, greened with age, half buried in the packed soil. Erin pulled gently, but it would not move. Whatever it belonged to was deeper, larger, hidden. She sat back on her heels, breathing hard. The garden had given her vegetables to plant. It had given her pain. It had given her exhaustion. And now it had given her a question. A real one. For the first time since Michael closed the door behind her, Erin felt something stronger than fear rise inside her. Purpose. She looked at the spiral of stones, then at the buried metal, then at the dark soil surrounding it. Louise's words returned clearer than ever. The garden will take care of you one day. Erin touched the exposed metal with trembling fingers. "What did you leave me?" she whispered. The wind moved through the cedar trees, and somewhere beneath the soil, the forgotten secret waited. The metal did not come loose that day, or the next. Erin Hernandez returned to the spiral of stones every morning, her body aching before she even bent down, her fingers stiff from cold and overuse. The curved edge she had uncovered remained stubbornly embedded in the earth, as if the ground itself refused to give up what it had protected for so long. But Erin no longer saw it as an obstacle. She saw it as an invitation. Each day, she worked with more intention. Not frantic, not desperate, careful, measured. Because somewhere deep inside her, she understood something had changed. This was no longer about survival. This was about discovery. She began bringing tools, whatever she could find in the old shed behind the house. A rusted shovel, a small hand trowel with a cracked wooden handle, even an old bucket to carry away loosened soil. None of it was ideal. All of it was enough. The spiral guided her. As she cleared more of the stones, their pattern became undeniable. They curved inward in precise intervals, narrowing toward the center where the metal lay buried. This was not something nature had created. Someone had built this. Someone had planned it. And Erin knew, without needing proof, that someone had been Luis. The thought both comforted and unsettled her. How much had he known? And why had he never told her? On the third day of digging, the ground finally gave way. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, inch by inch, as the soil loosened under her persistence. The metal revealed itself as part of a lid, oval-shaped, thick, secured at the edges by corroded hinges that had fused with time. Erin's breath grew shallow as she uncovered more of it. It was a container, buried deliberately, hidden beneath layers of soil, protected by the spiral of stones that had once marked its location. She sat back, wiping her forehead with the sleeve of Luis's jacket, her heart pounding in her chest. For a long moment, she did nothing, because opening it would mean crossing a line. Whatever was inside had been meant to stay hidden. And yet Luis had left it there, on their land, in his garden. The same garden he had insisted would one day take care of her. Erin leaned forward again. Her hands shook slightly as she cleared the remaining dirt from the edges of the lid. The hinges were stiff, but not impossible. With the help of the trowel, she pried carefully at one side, working slowly to avoid breaking anything. It resisted at first. Then, with a low grinding sound, it moved. Erin froze. The noise seemed too loud in the quiet of the garden, echoing out into the trees, as if announcing her actions to the world. She glanced over her shoulder instinctively. No one was there. Only the wind. Only the trees. Only the silent land that had watched everything unfold. She turned back to the container and took a slow breath. Then she lifted the lid. Inside, not gold, not jewels, not anything she had imagined. Instead, there was a smaller metal box wrapped in oilcloth that had yellowed with age, and beside it, a folded piece of paper. Erin stared at it. Her chest tightened in a way she couldn't explain. Because even before she touched it, she knew. She reached down slowly, her fingers brushing against the paper. It was fragile, worn, but intact. And when she unfolded it, her breath caught. The handwriting was unmistakable. Luis. She sank down onto the damp earth, the garden forgotten around her, as her eyes moved across the page. Erin, if you're reading this, then something has happened that brought you back here. I wish it hadn't taken that for you to find this place again. But I also knew one day it might. Her vision blurred slightly, but she blinked it away, forcing herself to keep reading. There are things I never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want to put you in danger. This land, this garden, it's not just soil and seeds. What's buried here has been hidden for generations. Erin's fingers tightened around the paper. Generations. Her mind raced, trying to piece together a past she had never fully known. Luis had rarely spoken about his family. He had mentioned growing up nearby, working the land with his father, learning things the old way, as he used to say. But this was something else. I found it by accident many years ago. And once I understood what it was, I knew I had to protect it. Not for me, not even for you. For the truth it holds. Erin swallowed hard. Truth. The word lingered in her mind, heavier than anything else on the page. If the wrong people ever find this, they won't see history. They'll see profit, and they'll destroy it, piece by piece. Her thoughts drifted unbidden to Michael, to Samantha, to the cold efficiency with which they had taken everything from her. And suddenly, Luis's silence made more sense. He hadn't just been secretive. He had been careful. But if you're here now, then maybe it's time. Open the smaller box. Follow what you find. And trust your instincts the way I trusted mine. The garden will take care of you. It always has. Erin lowered the paper slowly, her hands trembling. For a moment, the world felt very small. Just her, the letter, the open container, and the quiet weight of everything she had never known. Luis had lived with this secret for years, maybe decades. And he had chosen not to share it, not out of distance, but out of protection. Not because he didn't believe in her, but because he had believed too much in what this could become. Erin looked at the smaller box still wrapped in oilcloth. This was it, the beginning. Or maybe the continuation of something far older than either of them. She hesitated only briefly before reaching for it. The cloth came away easily, revealing a dark metal surface beneath etched faintly, with markings she didn't immediately recognize. Not decorative, not random, intentional, precise, almost like symbols. Her pulse quickened. This was no ordinary container. She found a small latch along the side, rusted but still functional. It took effort to loosen her fingers, straining against the resistance of time, but eventually it clicked. The sound echoed softly, and Erin opened it. Inside, a collection of items carefully arranged. Old documents, bound together with twine, a small leather notebook, and beneath them a map. Not of the garden, but of something much larger. Erin lifted the map, slowly unfolding it with care. It showed the surrounding land beyond her property, marked with lines, symbols, and coordinates that stretched into areas she had never explored. The scale of it made her breath catch. This wasn't just about her garden. This was about something buried beneath the entire region. Something hidden, protected, forgotten. Erin's heart pounded in her chest as realization began to form. Luis hadn't just left her a secret. He had left her a responsibility, a choice. She looked back at the letter, the words still echoing in her mind. If the wrong people ever find this, a chill ran through her. Because for the first time, Erin understood the full weight of what she had uncovered. This wasn't just a discovery. It was something people would want, something people would take. Just like everything else in her life had been taken. Her home, her trust, her sense of safety. But this time, Erin closed the box slowly, her expression hardening in a way it hadn't before. This time would be different. She folded the map carefully, placing it back inside. Then she picked up Luis's letter and held it close for a moment. "You should have told me," she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew why he hadn't. Because now that she understood, she would have done the same. Erin stood up slowly, her body aching, her hands dirty, her clothes worn. But something inside her had shifted completely. She was no longer just a woman trying to survive. She was the keeper of something hidden, something powerful, something that had waited for her. And as the wind moved through the garden once more, Erin Hernandez made a quiet decision. No one would take this from her. Not again. For 2 days, Erin Hernandez told no one what she had found. She moved through the old house quietly, almost carefully, as if speaking too loudly might wake the secret beneath the soil. The metal box stayed hidden under a loose floorboard in the pantry, wrapped again in oilcloth and covered with a folded towel. Every few hours, Erin checked it. Not because she feared it would disappear, but because part of her still needed proof that it was real. Luis's letter, the strange symbols, the old map, the documents tied with twine. They had changed the air around her. The house no longer felt abandoned. The garden no longer felt dead. Even the silence seemed to hold its breath. On the third morning, Erin carried the map outside and stood beneath the cedar trees where the spiral of stones curled into the earth. She had studied the markings by candlelight the night before, tracing the faded lines with one finger, trying to understand what Luis had left behind. There were shapes drawn beneath the property, narrow corridors, circular chambers, and what looked like an old passage running beyond the garden toward the wooded ridge behind the house. At first, Erin thought it had to be impossible. Then she remembered the metal lid buried exactly where the spiral had led her. Luis had known. And if Luis had known, then the map mattered. She followed the first line carefully, stepping through the weeds and damp grass, counting her paces as best she could. The map marked a place near the far end of the garden, just beyond the broken fence, where blackberry vines had grown so thick they formed a wall of thorns. Erin stood before them, breathing hard. "You always did make things difficult, Luis," she murmured. But there was affection in her voice now, and grief, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. She spent the rest of the morning cutting through the vines. The thorns caught her sleeves and scratched the back of her hands. Twice. She had to stop and sit on an overturned bucket, dizzy from effort. She was 75, hungry more often than not, and living in a house that still fought her at every corner. But she kept going, because every branch she cleared felt like a small refusal. A refusal to disappear. A refusal to be weak. A refusal to let Michael's betrayal become the final chapter of her life. By afternoon, she uncovered a narrow depression in the ground. At first, it looked like nothing more than a ditch. But when Erin cleared away leaves and mud, she saw stones beneath flat old stones set into the earth like steps. Her pulse quickened. She knelt slowly and brushed away more soil. The steps descended only a few feet before disappearing under a collapsed layer of dirt and roots, but there was no mistaking what she had found. A passage. Hidden, old, waiting. Erin sat back, her breath trembling. The map had been right. For several minutes, she could only stare. She imagined Luis standing here years ago, uncovering the same thing. Had he been afraid? Excited alone? Had he known even then that one day his wife would kneel in the same place, older, broken-hearted, and needing something to pull her back from the edge? A sound behind her made Erin turn sharply. At the broken fence stood a man in a brown canvas jacket, his gray hair flattened beneath an old baseball cap. Erin's heart jumped. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said. His voice was rough but not unkind. Erin pushed herself to her feet instinctively, stepping in front of the uncovered steps. "Can I help you?" The man's eyes moved past her toward the disturbed soil and cut vines, then back to her face. "You're Erin Hernandez," he said. She stiffened. "Who are you, Harold Whitaker?" "I live about half a mile east. Used to know Luis." The name stirred something faint in Erin's memory. Luis had mentioned a Whitaker once or twice years ago, usually in passing. A neighbor, a mechanic, someone who helped fix a tractor after a winter storm. But Erin had never trusted strangers easily. Not anymore. "What do you want?" she asked. Harold took off his cap, turning it in his hands. "Saw smoke from the chimney a few days back. Figured someone had finally come. Then I saw you working out here." His gaze shifted again toward the ground. "Thought I should check." Erin did not move. There was a guardedness in her now that had not existed before. Michael had taught her the cost of trusting too quickly. "I'm fine," she said. Harold looked at the sagging house, the broken fence, the muddy garden, and the elderly woman standing with scratched hands and tired eyes. But he did not contradict her. Instead, he said quietly, "Luis always said you were tougher than you looked." The words struck her harder than she expected. For one brief second, Erin's expression softened. Then she caught herself. "You knew my husband well enough to know he kept things to himself." Erin's fingers tightened around the handle of the small knife she had been using to cut vines. Harold noticed. So did she. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Harold lowered his voice. "Whatever you found out here, Mrs. Hernandez, be careful." Erin's stomach tightened. "I didn't say I found anything." "No!" Harold said. "You didn't." His eyes moved to the cedar trees. "But this land has never been ordinary." The wind passed through the garden, bending the weeds in waves. Erin hated how fast her heart had begun to beat. What does that mean? Harold seemed to consider how much to say. Then he stepped closer, but stopped several feet away, leaving enough distance to show he meant no harm. "My grandfather used to talk about this ridge. Said there were stories going back long before any of us owned deeds or fences. People came through here. Settlers, miners, church groups, families running from things no one wrote down properly. Some stayed, some vanished, some left things behind. Things, records, tools, maybe valuables, maybe bones. Depends who's telling the story." A chill moved through Erin. She thought of the documents in the box, the symbols, the map. Why would Louise hide it? Harold's face darkened. Because people don't protect history when they think they can sell it. The words echoed Louise's letter so closely that Erin almost stepped back. Harold saw the reaction and understood more than she wanted him to. "So, he did leave you something," he said softly. Erin said nothing. Harold nodded once, as if confirming a suspicion he had carried for years. "I never asked him. He never told me. But sometimes I'd see him working out here late after dark. Not gardening, searching, measuring, covering things back up." Erin felt a deep ache rise behind her ribs. Louise had carried this alone. All of it. While she cooked dinner, while she folded laundry, while she believed he was simply stubborn and distant. "He should have told me," she whispered. Harold's voice softened. "Maybe. Or maybe he was trying to keep you safe." Erin looked away. She was tired of being protected through silence. She was tired of men deciding what pain she could survive. But deep down, she also knew Louise had not been like Michael. Louise had hidden something to preserve it. Michael had hidden something to steal. That difference mattered. Harold pointed toward the partly uncovered steps. "If that leads where I think it does, don't go down alone. Ground could collapse, air could be bad. And if word gets out," he paused, "you'll have more visitors than you want. Visitors like who? Collectors, developers, county officials looking for credit, family members looking for money." Erin's face hardened at the last one. Harold noticed that too. "Someone already hurt you," he said. It wasn't a question. Erin's chin lifted. "My son took my home." Harold's eyes lowered, and for a moment genuine anger crossed his weathered face. "Then don't let him hear about this." Erin stared at the hidden steps. The old fear moved in her again, but now it had changed shape. It was no longer fear of being alone. It was fear of losing something that was finally hers, not because of wealth, but because of meaning. Because Louise had trusted her with it. Because the garden had waited for her. Because beneath the soil lay proof that her life still had a purpose. "I need to know what's down there," she said. Harold nodded slowly. "I figured you would. Will you help me?" The question surprised both of them. Erin had not planned to ask it. Harold had not expected to hear it. But once spoken, it felt right. Harold placed his cap back on his head. "I'll help you clear the entrance," he said. "But we do it slow, careful, and quiet." Erin looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for greed, impatience, calculation. She found none, only caution, and perhaps an old loyalty to Luis. For the first time in days, Erin did not feel completely alone. Together they stood before the buried passage as evening began to settle over the garden. The steps disappeared into darkness beneath the earth. Whatever waited below had survived storms, silence, and centuries. And now, at last, it had begun to whisper. They did not descend into the passage right away. Harold Whitaker insisted on that. "Secrets don't rot," he said on the first morning they returned with proper tools. "But people do when they rush into places that weren't meant to be entered in a hurry." Erin Hernandez didn't argue. A week ago she might have, back when she still believed urgency solved everything. Back when she thought if she just moved fast enough, trusted hard enough, held on tightly enough, she could stop things from falling apart. But that version of Erin had been left behind on a cold sidewalk in California. The woman standing in the Oregon garden now had learned something different. Some things required patience, and patience, in this case, might be the only thing keeping her alive. Together they worked, not just to clear the entrance, but to understand it. Harold reinforced the edges of the exposed steps with salvaged wood from the shed, hammering in supports where the soil had begun to crumble. He checked the air with a small handheld monitor he'd brought from his truck, explaining it was something he used when repairing underground tanks years ago. "Bad air's silent," he told her. "You don't notice it until it's too late." Erin nodded, absorbing everything. She watched the way he moved, careful, methodical, never wasting effort. And it reminded her of Luis in ways she hadn't expected. Not the same man, not the same presence, but the same respect for the unknown. At night, Erin returned to the house and studied the contents of the metal box. The leather notebook fascinated her the most. Its pages were filled with Luis's handwriting, neat, deliberate, and far more detailed than she had ever seen from him before. He had documented everything: dates, measurements, sketches of underground structures, observations about the soil composition, the stability of the ground, even notes about the weather patterns above the site. But scattered between the technical entries were something else: fragments of thought, short unfinished sentences, warnings, questions. Not just one chamber. Symbols repeat same pattern as stone spiral. Who built this pre-railroad earlier? If this connects beyond the property. And one line written darker than the rest: if anyone finds this before Erin, they won't understand what they're holding. Erin traced those words with her fingertip. For years she had believed Luis didn't trust her with the deeper parts of his life. Now she saw the truth more clearly. He had trusted her with the end of it, with the part that mattered most. That realization didn't erase the pain of his silence, but it reshaped it, gave it purpose. On the fourth day, Harold finally stood at the top of the reinforced steps and looked down into the narrow darkness below. I think it's stable enough for a short look, he said. Erin felt her chest tighten. This was it, the threshold. Everything until now had been preparation, speculation. Now there would be answers, or at least the beginning of them. Harold handed her a flashlight. You stay behind me, he said. If anything shifts, we come right back up. No arguing. Erin gave a small nod. For once, she didn't feel the need to prove anything. Not strength, not independence. She simply wanted to know. Harold stepped down first, testing each stone before placing his weight on it. Erin followed, gripping the side wall where packed earth met old stone, her breath shallow but steady. The temperature dropped immediately. Cool air rose from below, carrying the faint smell of damp soil and something older, something sealed away from the surface for a very long time. The steps descended farther than she expected. 10 feet, 15, then 20. At the bottom, the passage opened into a narrow corridor, reinforced with wooden beams that had darkened with age, but still held. Harold swept his flashlight slowly across the walls. Someone built this with intention, he murmured. Erin said nothing. Her heart was pounding too loudly in her ears. The corridor stretched forward, slightly sloped, disappearing into deeper shadow. And then she saw them, the markings, carved into the wooden supports and the stone behind them. The same symbols etched into the small metal box, repeating, consistent, deliberate. Her breath caught. It's real, she whispered. Harold glanced back at her. I never thought it wasn't. They moved forward, slowly. Every step felt like crossing into something that had existed long before them. Something that did not belong to their time. The corridor led into a small chamber. Circular, roughly carved. The ceiling arched low, supported by thicker beams, and the floor was packed dirt worn smooth in places, as if people had once walked there many times. Harold raised the light. The walls were covered in symbols, not random, organized. Patterns that repeated in sequences, almost like a language. Erin stepped closer, her fingers hovering just above the surface without touching. What is this? She whispered. Harold shook his head. Not something I have ever seen in person. Erin thought of the documents upstairs, of the map, of Luis's notes asking the same question. And then she noticed something else. A narrow opening at the far side of the chamber. Another passage, smaller, darker, leading deeper. Her pulse quickened. This isn't the end, she said. Harold followed her gaze and sighed quietly. No, it's not. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air felt heavier here, not dangerous, but significant, as if the space itself held memory. And then Erin saw it. In the center of the chamber, partially buried beneath a thin layer of dust. A wooden crate, smaller than the metal container she had found in the garden, but intact, protected, waiting. Her instincts sharpened immediately. This is it, she said. Harold knelt beside it, brushing away the dust carefully. No lock, he observed. But that doesn't mean safe. Erin stepped closer. Her hands trembled, not with fear this time, but with anticipation. Everything had led to this moment. The betrayal, the journey, the garden. Luis's silence. His letter. She knelt across from Harold. "Open it," she said. Harold hesitated only briefly before lifting the lid. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were more documents. Older, far older than anything they had seen before. The paper was yellowed brittle at the edges, covered in handwriting that was not Luis's. Different ink, different style, different time. Erin leaned closer. Some of the pages appeared to be records, names, dates, transactions. Others looked like letters. And beneath them, a metal plate engraved with the same symbols carved into the walls. Harold let out a low whistle. "This isn't just someone's secret stash," he said. "This is a record." A record of what Erin asked. Harold met her eyes. Something people didn't want lost. Erin felt the weight of those words settle deep in her chest. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Luis hadn't been protecting money or treasure. He had been protecting truth. Truth that could be twisted, sold, erased, or worse, used by the wrong people for the wrong reasons. Her mind flashed to Michael again, to Samantha, to the cold efficiency with which they had taken what was hers. If they knew about this, if anyone like them knew, the chamber would not remain intact for long. The documents would be scattered, sold, or locked away where no one could understand them. The story would be broken, lost. Erin straightened slowly, her body aching, but her mind sharper than it had been in years. "We have to protect this," she said. Harold nodded. "I figured you'd say that. But we also have to understand it," she added. "Which means eventually," Harold began. "We tell someone," Erin finished. The words felt heavy. Because telling the right person could preserve everything. And telling the wrong one could destroy it just as quickly. Harold closed the crate carefully. "Then we choose wisely," he said. Erin looked around the chamber one last time. At the symbols, the walls, the hidden passage leading deeper into darkness. This wasn't just a discovery. It was the beginning of something far bigger than either of them. And for the first time since she had been cast out of her own home, Erin Hernandez felt something undeniable rise within her. Not just purpose, not just strength, responsibility. Because Luis hadn't just left her a secret, he had left her a choice. And this time, no one was going to take it from her. Michael Hernandez returned on a Thursday afternoon. Erin saw his car before she saw his face. A black SUV rolled slowly up the gravel road, too polished for the muddy land, too expensive for a son who had claimed his mother's old house was a necessary business decision. Behind the kitchen curtain, Erin stood perfectly still, one hand resting on the windowsill. Her heart reacted first, a painful tightening. Then anger followed, quiet, steady, useful. Michael stepped out, wearing a navy coat, and careful concern, the kind of expression people practiced in mirrors when they wanted to look innocent. Samantha sat in the passenger seat for a moment longer, checking her phone, before finally opening the door. She looked around the property with visible distaste, as if poverty itself might stain her shoes. Erin watched them approach the porch. For the first time in her life, she did not rush to meet her son. She let him knock. Once, twice. Then she opened the door. Michael's face softened instantly. "Mom." The word struck her harder than she expected. Once, that voice had been small and frightened, calling for her in the dark. Once, she had held him through fevers, school, disappointments, and every failure he thought would end his world. Now he stood before her, after taking her home, and he expected the word "mom" to still be enough. "What are you doing here?" Erin asked. Michael blinked, surprised by the coldness in her tone. Samantha came up beside him with a tight smile. "We were worried," she said. Erin looked at her. "Were you?" The smile faltered. Michael cleared his throat. "We heard you came all the way up here alone. This place isn't safe. You're 75. You shouldn't be living like this." There it was. Concern shaped like control. Erin had heard it before. When he told her the papers were just temporary. When Samantha said signing would make things easier. When they smiled across the table and explained legal language, Erin had trusted them to understand honestly. She stepped back, but not to invite them in fully, just enough to remind herself this was her doorway. "I'm managing." Michael glanced past her into the house. His eyes moved too quickly. The worn floor, the old table, the hallway, searching. Not for her comfort, for evidence. "What have you been doing out here?" he asked. Erin's face remained calm. "Living." Samantha gave a small laugh. In this, Erin turned to her slowly. Samantha looked away first. Michael raised both hands. "Mom, we didn't come to fight." "No," Erin said. "You came because you want something." His expression stiffened. For one brief second, the practiced concern disappeared, and Erin saw the truth beneath it: irritation. He had expected weakness, tears, gratitude, maybe even fear. He had not expected her to see him clearly. "I came because someone in town mentioned you'd been digging around the property," Michael said. Erin's pulse sharpened, but she gave nothing away. "Someone, a man at the gas station, said an old neighbor's been helping you. Harold. Something." Samantha stepped forward. "People talk, Erin. They said you found old things, boxes, maybe records. So that was it. Not worry. Rumor, greed, had traveled faster than compassion." Erin leaned one shoulder against the doorframe. "And that concerned you?" Michael's jaw tightened. "If there's something valuable on this land, then we need to make sure it's handled properly. I'm your son. You were my son when you locked me out." The sentence landed like a slap. Michael looked down. For a moment, guilt passed across his face, not enough to change him, but enough to reveal that some part of him still knew the difference between right and wrong. Samantha did not blink. That situation was complicated, she said. Erin's eyes hardened. No. It was planned. Silence fell across the porch. The wind moved through the trees behind them, carrying the damp smell of the garden of soil and cedar and secrets buried deeper than Michael could imagine. Michael lowered his voice. Mom, listen to me. Whatever happened before, we can fix it. Come back with us. We'll talk. We'll find a better arrangement. Erin almost laughed. A better arrangement. That was how he described betrayal. Not cruelty, not theft. An arrangement. You want me back in California? She asked. Michael hesitated. Samantha answered too quickly. Of course. Erin looked between them and understood everything. If she left, they could search the property. If she trusted them, they could take control. If she became weak again, they could finish what they had started. But Erin Hernandez was no longer standing barefoot on a sidewalk with one bag in her hand. The garden had changed her. The buried passage had changed her. Luis's letter had changed her. And perhaps most of all, Michael's betrayal had burned away the last soft illusion she had been using to protect herself. No, she said. Michael's face tightened. No, Mom, don't be stubborn. I was stubborn when I survived the first night here with no heat. I was stubborn when I cleared that garden with bleeding hands. I was stubborn when I realized my own child had counted on my love to make me foolish. Her voice shook, but it did not break. So, yes, Michael, I'm stubborn. For the first time, he looked unsettled. Samantha's impatience broke through. This is ridiculous. You can't seriously think you can manage anything important at your age. Erin looked at her with a calm that surprised even herself. My age is the only reason. I can see you so clearly. Samantha flushed. Michael stepped closer. If there are historical materials here, legal ownership might be complicated. Erin knew the sentence had not come from him. It sounded rehearsed, likely from an attorney, maybe from a hurried internet search, maybe from Samantha, who always spoke as if every human relationship were a contract waiting to be exploited. The land is in my name, Erin said. Michael frowned. Are you sure? That question told her more than he intended. He had expected uncertainty. Maybe he had believed Luis's old property had never been properly handled. Maybe Samantha had convinced him there might be a loophole. Maybe the same greed that took her city home had now reached toward this rural land. Erin stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind her. The action was small, but it placed her outside with them, face to face. I'm sure, she said. Michael's expression changed again, less gentle now, more direct. You don't understand what you might be dealing with. No, Erin replied. You don't. A car door slammed in the distance. All three turned. Harold Whitaker's pickup rolled up the drive and stopped near the broken fence. He stepped out slowly, his eyes moving from Michael to Samantha to Erin. Everything about his posture changed. Not aggressive. Protective. Afternoon, Harold said. Michael forced a smile. You must be Harold. I must be. Samantha's eyes narrowed. We were having a family conversation. Harold looked at Erin. Want me to leave? Erin did not hesitate. No. Michael exhaled sharply. Mom, this doesn't concern him. It does if I say it does. The words were simple, but they carried something Erin had not felt in years. Authority, her own. Michael stared at her, and for the first time Erin saw not just frustration, but fear. Not fear of her. Fear of losing access. Fear that the woman he had dismissed might hold something beyond his reach. Samantha touched his arm. We should go. For now. Michael did not want to. Erin could see it. His eyes kept drifting toward the garden, toward the cedars, toward the land that had suddenly become important. But he also knew he had miscalculated. He had come expecting a broken mother. He had found a guarded woman with a witness beside her and secrets behind her eyes. We'll talk again, Michael said. No, Erin replied. We won't. Not unless I choose to. His face hardened. For a moment the sun vanished completely, and only the man remained the man who had learned to justify anything as long as it benefited him. This isn't over, he said. Erin held his gaze. I know. Michael turned and walked back to the SUV. Samantha followed her heels, sinking slightly into the soft ground. Before getting in, she looked back at the house with an expression Erin recognized instantly. Calculation. Then the SUV pulled away, dust rising behind it until the road swallowed them. Erin stood still until the sound faded. Only then did her knees weaken. Harold moved closer, but did not touch her. You all right? Erin looked toward the garden, toward the hidden passage, toward the truth waiting below. No, she said honestly. But I'm not afraid of him the way I was. Harold nodded. That's a start. Erin wrapped Luis's old jacket tighter around herself. For years she had measured love by how much she could forgive. Now she understood something painful and freeing. Forgiveness did not mean handing someone the knife again. Michael had come back for more. But this time, Erin would not open the door to her own destruction. This time she would protect what remained. And if justice had to rise from the soil itself, then Erin Hernandez would be ready to stand beside it. The storm arrived 2 nights after Michael left. It did not come gently. It rolled across the Oregon countryside like something angry wind, first, then rain, then a heavy silence that felt almost alive. The old house groaned under the pressure, as if it too remembered being forgotten and did not appreciate being disturbed. Erin Hernandez stood at the window with a flashlight in her hand, watching the garden disappear into sheets of water. But she did not feel fear. Not anymore. Only urgency. Because before the storm had fully broken, she and Harold Whitaker had made a decision. They could not wait. Not with Michael watching. Not with Samantha calculating. Not with whatever this land was hiding, still buried beneath soil and time. If we don't go down now, Harold had said earlier that evening, the rain might collapse half of it. So they prepared. Now, in the trembling dark, Erin tightened her grip on the flashlight and stood at the edge of the hidden entrance once more. The spiral of stones was partially flooded. Water streamed between them, carrying loose soil down into the opening, like the earth itself was trying to seal the secret shut. Harold checked the support beams again. Still stable, he said, though his voice carried tension. But we don't have much time. Erin nodded. No speeches, no hesitation, only movement. They descended together. The steps were slick now, the earlier stability threatened by water seeping through every crack. The air inside the passage was colder than before, heavy with damp earth, and the faint metallic smell of aged iron. At the bottom, Harold swept his light forward. The underground corridor had changed. Where before it had been dry and still, now water dripped steadily from the beams, forming small streams along the floor. The symbols carved into the walls appeared darker, almost alive under the shifting light. Erin followed close behind him. Every step echoed. Every sound felt amplified. The deeper they went, the more the passage seemed to tighten around them, as if the earth itself was resisting their presence. Harold stopped suddenly. Here, he said, the second chamber. The one they had seen only briefly before the storm forced them to retreat. Now, however, something was different. The wooden crate they had discovered days earlier was no longer sitting in still dust. It had shifted. Water had seeped in, softening the soil beneath it. The crate now rested at a slight angle, as if the ground beneath it had begun to give way. Erin felt a cold spike of urgency. "It's collapsing," she said. Harold nodded. "Then we open it, fast." They knelt together. Harold worked the lid carefully, while Erin steadied the box. The wood resisted, at first swollen from moisture, but then gave with a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber. Inside, the contents were unchanged, but their meaning had changed entirely. Documents wrapped in oilcloth, a leather-bound ledger, map folded with precision, and beneath them, a second layer of items neither of them had seen before. Photographs. Erin reached for them first. Her hands trembled as she lifted the top one. Black and white. Old. Faded. It showed the land, her land, but from a time long before she was born. Men standing near structures that no longer existed above ground. Symbols painted on wooden frames. A gathering of people around what looked like an excavation. Erin turned the photo slightly. Another image beneath it. And another. Each one revealing more. A hidden network. Structures beneath the surface. People documenting something they had clearly intended to preserve, not destroy. Harold exhaled slowly. "This is not just a storage site," he said. "It's a record of something intentional, organized." Erin flipped through more photographs. Her breath caught when she saw it. A wide underground chamber, larger than anything they had yet discovered, filled with shelves, artifacts, and carved symbols across every surface. "This goes deeper," she whispered. Harold nodded grimly. "Much deeper." Erin looked at the ledger next. The leather was cracked with age, but the writing inside remained legible. Names, transactions, not financial ones, but exchanges of knowledge, land permissions, coded references to protected by sites. Then one line made her stop completely. If the surface is lost, the memory remains below. Erin felt something shift inside her chest. This was not random. This was not accidental. This was preservation. Someone, many people, Possibly generations had been protecting something underground, while the world above changed, forgot, or destroyed what mattered. And Louise had been part of it. She turned to Harold. He knew she said quietly. Harold didn't ask who. He already understood. Your husband wasn't just a gardener, he said. He was a caretaker of something bigger. The rain above intensified, shaking the ground slightly. A deep rumble passed through the chamber. Harold stood quickly. We need to go, now. But Erin didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the final item in the crate, a folded cloth pouch, smaller than everything else, heavier than it looked. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single object, a carved stone disc, smooth, dark, covered in the same repeating symbols etched into the walls, but in the center a fracture line, as if it had been broken once and repaired imperfectly. Harold stared at it. Whatever this is, he said slowly, it wasn't meant to be separated. Erin held it carefully. It felt warm in her hands despite the cold underground air. And in that moment, something clicked, not physically, but emotionally. Luis had not just been hiding history. He had been guarding balance, a system, a structure, something that, if disturbed incorrectly, could be misused. And Michael had already started circling it like a predator, smelling opportunity. A distant crack echoed through the tunnel. Dust fell from the ceiling. Harold grabbed her arm. Erin, we go. This time she obeyed. They moved quickly, climbing the slick steps as water began pouring into the passage behind them. The storm above had intensified, and the earth itself seemed unstable now, as if the boundary between above and below was collapsing. By the time they reached the surface, rain was falling so hard it blurred the world. The garden was half submerged, the spiral of stones nearly invisible under rising water. Harold pulled Erin toward the house. Inside they stood, breathing heavily soaked, shaken, holding what they had retrieved like something fragile and dangerous. Erin placed the stone disc on the table. It looked ordinary now, but she knew better. Harold ran a hand through his wet hair. We're dealing with something that's been hidden for a reason. Erin nodded slowly. Yes. And your son? He asked carefully. Erin's expression hardened. He thinks this is about money. Harold looked at her. And is it? Erin looked toward the storm outside, at the garden, at the land that had once been dismissed as empty. No, she said quietly. It's about control over what people choose to remember. A long silence followed. Then Harold said, Then he'll come back. Erin didn't answer, because she already knew. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. And somewhere beyond the storm, Michael Hernandez was likely already planning his next move. But inside the house, for the first time since everything had been taken from her, Erin was no longer waiting to be rescued. She was preparing to defend something far older than her pain, and far more important than her past. By morning, the storm had passed, but it had not left peace behind. The garden looked wounded. Mud covered the spiral of stones. Small branches lay scattered across the paths Erin had worked so hard to clear. Water filled the shallow entrance, to the hidden passage, turning the opening into a dark, trembling pool. Erin Hernandez stood at the back door with a cup of weak coffee in her hand, watching the land breathe beneath gray morning light. Nothing about it looked miraculous, not from the surface. From the surface it looked like ruin. But Erin knew better now. Some miracles did not arrive shining. Some had to be uncovered through mud, grief, and bleeding hands. On the kitchen table behind her lay the stone disc, the photographs, Luis's notebook, and the old documents they had rescued from below. Harold Whitaker sat across from them, his face lined with exhaustion and concern. "We can't keep this private much longer," he said. Erin did not turn from the window. "I know. If Michael already heard rumors, others will too." At the sound of her son's name, something cold moved through her. Michael had not called. Not to ask if she survived the storm. Not to ask whether the old roof held. Not to ask if his 75-year-old mother had food, heat, or dry clothes. But Erin knew he would contact her soon. Not because he cared, because greed was patient when it smelled profit. Harold tapped one finger beside Luis's notebook. "We need someone official. A university archaeologist, maybe. County historical office. Someone who can document this properly." Erin turned then. "And someone who won't steal it." Harold met her eyes. "That's the hard part." Before either of them could say more, a knock sounded at the front door. Not gentle, not hesitant, firm, official. Erin and Harold exchanged one glance. Her stomach tightened. When she opened the door, Michael stood on the porch with Samantha beside him. But this time, they were not alone. A man in a charcoal suit stood between them, holding a leather briefcase, his expression polished and empty. Michael smiled thinly. "Mom, we need to talk." Erin looked from him to the suited man. "No," she said. "You need something." The attorney stepped forward. "Mrs. Hernandez, my name is Warren Blake. I represent Michael Hernandez and Samantha Reed in a matter concerning possible assets discovered on family-associated property." Erin stared at him. Family-associated. The phrase was so dishonest, it almost impressed her. "This property is mine," she said. Warren smiled with professional patience. "That may be one interpretation." Harold appeared behind Erin. "It's the legal one." Warren's eyes flicked to Harold, briefly dismissing him as irrelevant. Michael stepped closer. "Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be." The words cut deeper than Erin expected, because they sounded almost identical to the way Samantha had spoken before taking her city home. A practiced line. A family script written by greed. Samantha lifted her chin. "If there are historical or valuable materials on this land, Michael has a right to ensure they aren't mishandled." Erin let out a slow breath. "Michael has no right to anything here." His face tightened. "I'm Luis's son, too, whether you wanted to admit it or not." The words struck the porch like a thrown stone. Erin froze. Harold's eyes sharpened. Samantha looked satisfied, as if she had been waiting for that sentence to land. For one unbearable moment, Erin could not speak. Michael was not Luis's biological son. Luis had raised him since he was 4 years old. after Erin's first husband left and never returned. Louise had loved him quietly, steadily, completely. He had taught him how to fix a fence, how to sharpen a blade, how to sit through disappointment without blaming everyone else. Michael had called him Dad for 30 years, but now, when there was something to gain, he reached for Louise like property. Erin's voice came out low. You didn't honor him when he was alive. Michael's expression flickered. You don't get to decide that. No, Erin said, but your actions already did. Warren opened his briefcase and removed a folder. We have reason to believe there may be undocumented materials of financial significance connected to Mr. Luis Hernandez estate. Until ownership is clarified, my clients request access to inspect the property. Erin did not touch the folder. No. Warren's smile faded slightly. Refusing cooperation may complicate matters. Harold stepped forward. Threatening an elderly woman on her own porch may complicate yours. Samantha snapped, This is not your business. It became my business when I watched her son tried to corner her. Michael's face flushed. Erin raised one hand slightly, not to silence Harold, but to steady the moment. She looked directly at Warren. Bring your papers to the county court if you think you have a claim. Until then, get off my land. The attorney studied her more carefully now. Perhaps he had expected confusion, weakness, an old woman easily frightened by legal language. Instead, he found someone who had already lost too much to be intimidated by tone. Michael leaned in his voice, dropping, You have no idea what you're doing. Erin stepped closer too. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm saying no. For a moment, mother and son stood inches apart, separated by far more than distance. Behind Michael's anger, Erin saw desperation. Not grief, not shame, desperation. He had debts. She could feel it now. Something more than greed was driving him. Maybe investments gone bad. Maybe Samantha's spending. Maybe the house they had stolen from her had not solved whatever problem they were hiding. But desperation did not excuse cruelty. It only revealed what cruelty wanted. Warren placed the folder back into his briefcase. We'll be in touch. I'm sure you will, Erin said. Michael turned to leave, but Samantha paused. Her eyes moved past Erin toward the hallway, toward the kitchen, toward the table where the rescued items lay hidden from view. You should be careful, Samantha said softly. People can lose things very quickly at your age. Erin smiled then, not warmly, not kindly, but with the calm of a woman who had finally stopped shrinking. Yes, she said. I learned that from you. Samantha's face hardened before she followed Michael down the steps. The SUV drove away moments later, throwing mud behind its tires. Only when it disappeared did Erin close the door. Her hand trembled against the knob. Harold saw it, but said nothing. That kindness mattered. Erin walked back to the kitchen table and sat down slowly. Her body felt heavy, as if every old wound had been reopened at once. Michael, invoking Luis, had hurt more than the threats, more than the lawyer, more than Samantha's cruelty. Because Luis had given Michael love, he never owed him. And Michael had turned even that into leverage. Erin pressed her palm over Luis's notebook. "I need help," she said. Harold nodded. "Yes, not just from you." "I know." Within the hour, Harold called a retired county clerk. He trusted a woman named Bethany Cole, who had spent 30 years working property records and local preservation cases. Bethany arrived before noon in an old Subaru wearing rain boots and carrying a folder thick with forms. She listened carefully. She examined Erin's deed. She looked at Luis's old papers. Then she said the first sentence that allowed Erin to breathe. "The land is legally yours. Clear title. No shared ownership. No estate claim from Michael, unless you grant one." Erin closed her eyes briefly. Bethany continued. "But if these materials are historically significant, you need formal documentation immediately. Not tomorrow. Today." By late afternoon, Bethany had contacted the County Historical Preservation Office and a professor of archaeology from Oregon State University, Dr. Margaret Ellis, who agreed to come the following morning with a small team. Everything was moving now, faster than Erin expected, faster than she wanted. But there was no stopping it. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the garden, Erin stood alone beside the flooded entrance. The soil was quiet again, but the world above it had changed. The secret was no longer sleeping. Michael knew enough to want it. The authorities would soon know enough to protect it. And Erin stood between greed and truth, with nothing but an old house, a legal deed, and a courage. She was still learning to trust. Harold joined her near the cedar trees. "You ready for what comes next?" Erin looked at the spiral beneath the mud. "No," she said honestly. Then she lifted her chin. "But I wasn't ready to be betrayed either." The wind moved softly through the branches. This time, it did not sound like warning. It sounded like witness. And Erin Hernandez understood that justice had not arrived yet. But it had begun walking toward her. The next morning did not begin quietly. By 8 a.m., 3 vehicles were already parked along the gravel road, one from the County Historical Preservation Office, another from Oregon State University, and a third belonging to Bethany Cole, who had arrived early to organize everything with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades navigating complicated truths. Erin Hernandez stood on the porch watching strangers walk toward her land with clipboards, cameras, and careful curiosity. For a moment, something inside her tightened. This had been a secret. Luis's secret. Now it was becoming something public, something documented, something no one could hide again. "Still, time to change your mind," Harold Whitaker said quietly beside her. Erin shook her head. "No. If I keep this buried, someone like Michael will dig it up for the wrong reasons." Harold nodded. "Then we do it the right way." The first to approach was a woman in her late 50s, her gray-streaked hair tied back neatly, her eyes alert but not invasive. "Mrs. Hernandez?" she asked. Erin stepped forward. "Yes." "I'm Dr. Margaret Ellis," the woman said, extending her hand. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Erin studied her briefly before shaking it. Dr. Ellis's grip was firm, respectful, not overpowering. A good sign. Behind her, two graduate students unloaded equipment, while a county official, Daniel Brooks, reviewed paperwork with Bethany near the truck. We'll proceed. Carefully, Dr. Ellis said. No excavation beyond what you've already exposed until we document everything. That's all I want, Erin replied. Documentation, protection. Dr. Ellis's expression softened slightly. Then we're on the same page. By mid-morning, the garden had transformed. What had once been overgrown weeds and quiet secrets now held measured lines, marked areas, and deliberate movement. Cameras documented every stone of the spiral. Soil samples were collected. The entrance to the passage was secured with temporary supports. Erin watched it all from a distance, not excluded, but no longer alone. For the first time since Luis's death, the land felt recognized. Raed ben Fem. At 10:30 a.m., Dr. Ellis approached Erin again. We're ready to enter the lower chamber, she said. Would you like to be present? Erin hesitated only briefly. Yes. They descended together, Dr. Ellis, one student, Harold, and Erin. The passage felt different now. Not just because of the equipment, but because of intention. What had once been hidden was now being understood. In the chamber, Dr. Ellis moved slowly, her eyes scanning the symbols, the preserved materials. She did not speak for several minutes. Then quietly, "This is extraordinary." Erin felt her breath catch. Extraordinary how Dr. Ellis turned to her. This appears to be part of an undocumented preservation network, likely late 18th to early 19th century, possibly earlier. These symbols, she gestured toward the walls, suggest a coded system used by multiple groups to mark protected sites. Protected from what, Erin asked? Dr. Ellis's expression darkened slightly. Conflict, land seizure, cultural erasure, sometimes even their own government. History isn't always preserved openly. Mrs. Hernandez, Erin thought of Luis, of the years he had spent protecting something he never explained. He knew, she said softly. Dr. Ellis nodded. Yes, and from what I've seen so far, he did the right thing. The words settled deep inside Erin. For years she had wondered if Luis's silence meant distance. Now she understood it had been responsibility. They returned to the surface just before noon. But they were not alone. Michael Hernandez stood near the edge of the property, with Samantha and Warren Blake, and two additional men Erin had never seen before. Developers. She knew it immediately. The way they stood, the way they looked at the land, not with curiosity, but with calculation. Her stomach turned. They're early, Harold muttered. No, Erin said quietly. They're desperate. Michael approached as soon as he saw her. This is getting out of hand, he said, gesturing toward the equipment, the officials, the archaeologists. You've brought in outsiders without consulting me. Erin's voice remained calm. I don't need your permission. Warren stepped forward. We've filed a preliminary claim pending review. Until ownership is clarified, ownership is already clarified. Bethany interrupted, stepping beside Erin with a folder in hand. Deed verified, filed. No legal standing for your clients. Warren's expression tightened. This is not concluded. No, Bethany agreed. But it's enough to keep you off the excavation. Dr. Ellis joined them. This site is now under preliminary historical review, she said firmly. Interference could result in federal penalties. One of the developers frowned. You're overreaching. Dr. Ellis didn't flinch. I'm protecting a site that appears to hold significant, undocumented historical value. If you'd like to challenge that, I suggest you do it through proper channels. Michael's patience snapped. This is my family's land. Erin stepped forward. No, she said. Silence fell. Even the wind seemed to pause. This is my land, Erin continued. And this, she gestured toward the garden, the house, the people working carefully around the spiral, is my decision. Michael's face flushed with anger. You don't understand what you're giving away. Erin looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time she saw not her son, but a man who had traded love for control. You don't understand what you've already lost, she said. The words hit harder than anything she had said before. Michael stepped back slightly. Samantha reached for his arm. Let's go, she whispered. But he didn't move. Not yet. His eyes moved across the property. The cameras, the officials, the archaeologists, every advantage he thought he had was slipping away. And for the first time, Erin saw it clearly. This was justice. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Michael turned to Warren. This isn't over. Warren nodded, but his confidence had faded, because the truth was already taking shape. And truth, once documented, was much harder to steal. Michael looked at Erin one last time. You'll regret this. Erin's answer came without hesitation. No, she said. I already lived my regret. He turned and walked away. This time, he did not look back. The SUV drove off. The developers followed. And just like that, the threat shifted. Not gone, but weakened. Harold exhaled slowly. That might be the last easy day. Erin nodded. I know. She looked out across the garden. At the spiral. At the entrance. At the land that had once been forgotten and was now becoming something protected, recognized, valued. Not because of money, but because of truth. Dr. Ellis approached again, holding a preliminary report. This site may qualify for national historical protection, she said. If that happens, it changes everything. Erin took the paper. Her hands no longer trembled. Then, let it change everything, she said. Because, for the first time in her life, change did not feel like loss. It felt like restoration. And as the sun broke through the clouds, for the first time since the storm, Erin Hernandez stood in her garden, not as someone who had lost everything, but as someone who had uncovered something no one else had the courage to protect. The garden did not return to silence. It transformed. Weeks passed, and the once forgotten land behind Erin Hernandez's house became something no one in the county could ignore. Temporary fencing went up around the spiral. Protective coverings shielded the entrance to the passage. Tents appeared first small, then larger housing equipment, documentation stations, and carefully cataloged artifacts. But for all the movement, the noise, the attention, the heart of the place remained steady, preserved, respected. Erin stood on the porch one morning, a cup of tea warming her hands, watching as Dr. Margaret Ellis spoke with her team near the cedar trees. Their voices were low, measured, almost reverent. They were not here to take. They were here to understand. That distinction mattered. It mattered more than Erin had expected. For years she had believed value came from what could be held, sold, or secured. Her son had reinforced that belief with painful clarity. But standing there now watching history emerge from the soil, not as profit, but as truth, Erin understood something deeper. Value came from what endured, and what one chose to protect. Behind her, the house had changed too, not restored to perfection, but lived in. The kitchen now held shelves stocked with food. The old stove had been repaired. New insulation lined the walls, courtesy of a small grant Bethany had helped secure for historical site preservation support. It wasn't luxury, but it was enough. And for the first time in years, enough felt like peace. Harold Whitaker walked up the steps, wiping his hands on a rag. "They found another section," he said. Erin turned. "Deeper, connected to the second chamber. Looks like a storage area, more documents. Some metal tools, too, Erin nodded slowly. Every new discovery confirmed what Louise had spent years protecting. This had never been just a hiding place. It had been a network, a system, a promise passed through generations that some truths should not be erased just because they were inconvenient. Dr. Ellis thinks it might qualify for federal protection within the month, Harold added. Erin looked back toward the garden. "Good." Harold leaned against the porch railing. "You did this?" Erin shook her head. "No. Louise started it. And you finished it." Erin didn't respond right away, because the truth was more complicated than that. Louise had carried the burden, alone. She had uncovered it. But what mattered most was not who started or finished anything. It was that the truth had survived. A car pulled into the gravel drive. Erin's body reacted instantly. A brief tightening, a flicker of old instinct. But when she saw the vehicle, a county car, she relaxed. Not Michael. Not Samantha. They had not returned in weeks. There had been no calls, no letters, no apologies. And strangely, Erin no longer waited for them. Because the part of her that had once needed their validation had been replaced by something stronger. Self-worth. Not given, not requested. Earned. Later that afternoon, Erin walked alone into the garden. The air was crisp, the ground soft beneath her shoes. The spiral of stones was now clearly visible again, cleaned and preserved, its pattern no longer hidden beneath neglect. She followed it slowly, each step deliberate, each breath steady. At the edge of the excavation, she paused. Workers moved carefully, below documenting, photographing, preserving. No one rushed. No one took shortcuts. Because this place demanded patience. The same patience Louise had practiced. The same patience Erin had learned. She moved away from the activity and toward a quiet corner near the cedar trees. There, a small wooden bench had been placed, simple, unremarkable, but it faced the garden, the land, the truth. Erin sat down. For a long moment she said nothing, then softly, "You were right." The words drifted into the air. Not loud, not dramatic, but certain. The garden took care of me. A breeze moved through the trees, gentle, warm. And for the first time, Erin allowed herself to feel something she had held back for years. Grief. Not the sharp, breaking kind, but the quiet, aching kind that comes when you finally understand someone you lost. Luis had not been distant. He had been carrying something too heavy to explain. And he had trusted her, not with the burden itself, but with the moment when it would matter most. Tears slipped down Erin's cheeks. She did not wipe them away. She did not hide them. Because this time, her pain was not weakness. It was proof of love that had endured even through silence. Footsteps approached. Harold stopped a few feet away. "They're asking for you," he said. Erin took a breath and stood. "For what press?" "Local news. They want a statement." Erin smiled faintly. A statement. A month ago, she had been invisible. A burden. A problem to be removed. Now people wanted to hear her speak. The irony was not lost on her. "Tell them I'll come in a minute," she said. Harold nodded and walked back. Erin took one last look at the garden, at the place that had once seemed like the end of everything, and had become the beginning of something far greater. She understood now loss was not always an ending. Sometimes it was a return to something real, something buried beneath everything the world tried to take. As she walked toward the house, Erin felt the weight of her past settle differently inside her. Not gone, but transformed. Michael had taken her home, but he had never owned her. Samantha had tried to diminish her, but she had never defined her. Because in the end, Erin Hernandez had not lost everything. She had uncovered what truly mattered, and that was something no one could ever take again. She stepped onto the porch, paused, then turned once more toward the garden. A quiet smile touched her lips. Not of victory, but of peace. Because the miracle, hidden for centuries, had not just been buried beneath the soil. It had been waiting inside her all along.